trying to come up with. And Megan, or maybe Kirsten, do you have a preference around roll? Megan, if you're able to call roll, that'd be great, but I could also read off the names. Any
I can
thoughts?
do it.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to.
And I guess I should ask Aaron or Amy, who would like to kick off?
I believe Aaron's planning on kicking off.
Okay. Nice to see you, Amy. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Day by day.
Same.
Okay, my clock shows 1:30. Are we ready to go?
Good on Zoom end.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for October 21st to order. Our first item is roll. And Megan, if you wouldn't mind calling roll, that'd be great.
Last name?
Anderson.
Anderson?
Click the blue.
Oh, right, that's right. Becerra? Contos?
Here.
Harp? Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Merritt?
Here.
Ramos?
I think Jesse's going to miss a send a note.
Okay. Cheryl? Vasika?
Present.
Von Lossberg?
I'm here.
West?
Here.
We just have a quorum.
I'm not going to be talking for the most part. I'm just going to be sitting here.
And I think we have a couple other committee members that are maybe muted. Heather, I see you, and Heidi. Anyway, we'll have some other people will be joining. I know other council members are here as well. We're coming back from lunch. We have minutes to approve from, sorry, I'm pulling it up. Minutes to approve from 9/23. If there are no objections, those will stand approved. Seeing none. And want to just remind folks, we are obviously continuing to meet virtually. Thanks for joining us and being here for the Zoom webinar. When I call for public comment, please use the raise lower hand feature to let me know that you wish to be recognized, and I will take folks in the order that they raise their hands. You'll need to unmute your mic when we go through that process. And if you've joined us by phone today, you can raise and lower your hand by pressing *9, and then you can unmute yourself by using *6. And I understand those are supposed to work as toggles. So again, *9 for muting and unmuting, and I'm sorry, star 9 for raising your hand and lowering it, and star 6 for muting and unmuting. And I'll call on you if you participated by phone by calling the last 4 digits of your phone number. And again, the star 6 for unmuting. We have, I will call for public comment on non-agenda items. We have 1 agenda item for today, but is there any public comment on not on the agenda? Seeing none, I will move to our 1 agenda item, which is a update and contract associated with emergency winter shelter. And I will turn it over to Erin Pan for kicking off.
Good afternoon, Erin Pehan with the Office of Housing and Community Development. We are here today to provide you an update on our emergency winter shelter plan going into the winter season, and also to ask council to authorize the mayor to sign a contract for services for emergency winter shelter with the Poverello Center. As many of you know, the city of Missoula partnered with the Poverello Center last year to provide emergency winter shelter services. We lean on the POV's over 40 years of experience, and this partnership ensured that everybody who was able to come indoors last year had the ability to do so and had a safe, staffed, warm environment that could additionally connect them to the services that they need to move beyond homelessness. This partnership was driven by City Council in their belief that housing and safe shelter as a component of that is a human right. This year, with the complications of COVID, we faced an even greater challenge in creating a plan for emergency winter shelter that could meet the needs of our community and ensure everyone who is able to come indoors has a space to do so. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Amy Allison Thompson with the Poverello Center, our partner in this endeavor, to talk a little bit with us about the plan that we have established moving forward. And then after that, Jenny Miriam, our communications director, is going to talk about how we plan to communicate these services to the community.
Thanks, Erin. Amy, all yours.
Wonderful. Thanks, Erin and Brian. And thanks to all of you for having me on today to talk a little bit about our plans for this winter. So what it's being referred to is the Johnson Street Emergency Shelter. As some of you might remember, in previous years, the way that winter shelter has worked is utilizing the Salvation Army's location for overflow. At that time, that worked extremely well. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we've had to completely change our plans, just as many of us have because of COVID. So what we're doing now is actually looking at using this Johnson Street space to shelter up to 150 people this winter. Because of COVID, the POV normally would be sleeping 175 people. Right now, we're only sleeping 88. And that is so we're able to provide 6 feet of distance in between all folks that are using our spaces. So we are significantly reduced in our capacity, meaning that we have many more people sleeping outside right now. As folks may have noticed throughout the summer, we are really facing a serious shortage of shelter beds at this time. And so what we're doing now is this new plan because of COVID. So it is an expanded plan simply for emergency COVID response. Another thing that will change compared to last year is that we will be operating the shelter 24 hours a day rather than just overnight. The reason for that is because at this time, many places where folks normally would get warm during the day are not operating with the same capacity or ability for folks to be warm. For example, people sometimes would get warm at the library or at the Salvation Army or other coffee shops around town, that kind of thing. Due to COVID and social distancing requirements, many of those places are not open or are not allowing folks to come in just to get warm. And so there is a serious need, especially once it gets bitter cold, for that space. And so we have proposed this 24-hour site instead. So we look forward to the opportunity to have that space for folks whenever they need it, 24 hours a day. Other important things to note is that we, of course, will be following strict CDC guidelines. We've been doing that at the Poverello Center as well. So really have worked with the health department to make sure that all of our plans are in line with all of those guidelines. Things like making sure that we have 6 feet between all sleeping spaces, making sure that any meal service is in compliance with those guidelines, as well as many cleaning protocols and that type of thing. We also do very regular screenings of all of our guests. At this location, we'll be screening folks on a daily basis for symptoms. That involves taking people's temperatures, as well as asking them all of those symptoms that all of us have become familiar with over the past couple of months. And we have a process for managing that. If somebody is identified to have symptoms, then we refer them to medical care and ensure that they don't access services until they've been evaluated. So that has been working extremely well for us at the POV. We've been very proactive in our approach with COVID and really have seen the results of that in not having a ton of problems around COVID this year. So we've been extremely lucky that our protocols are working well. We are also hoping to provide meals at this location. We are currently
Does that mean
working
you
with
finished that letter writing assignment?
so, you're okay, Julie?
Sorry.
So in terms of meals, we're currently working with the health department, making sure that we're covering all of our bases to hopefully provide sack lunches at a minimum at this site. We're also hoping to provide a warm meal as well once per day. That meal would be prepared at the Poverello Center and then transported over to the Johnson Street location because there is not a commercial kitchen at that space. And so we're currently working out those logistics and hope to have that in place as soon as possible as well. So that's kind of the framing for the space at this time. We are having an open house happening next week on Thursday from 3:30 to 7, where folks who are curious are welcome to come by and see what the space looks like. If you're not familiar with it, you're welcome to join us at that time. In addition to that, we at the Poverello Center also provide a monthly neighborhood meeting, they're called, and that opportunity is for our neighbors to meet with us, talk about any concerns that they've had, do some brainstorming around any issues we've faced, things that are going well, that kind of thing. So we'll be doing the same thing for the neighborhood for Johnson Street. So we'll be holding a monthly neighborhood meeting. That's the second Wednesday of every month at noon. That will be held via Zoom, so we will have information about that out as well. The next one, the first one, will be November 11th at noon, so we welcome anyone that is a neighbor to come to that meeting, and feel free to bring any questions or thoughts you might have at that time as well. In addition to that, things I wanted to mention were just some of the challenges we're facing through this preparation. One of the challenges are staffing. I think I'm seeing this all around our community, but are seeing some challenges with getting folks hired up for this location. We plan to have 4 staff on at all times, but hiring has been a little slower than we had hoped. I would assume partially due to COVID. And so we continue to work on getting folks hired, but would encourage you, if you know of anybody that would be a good fit, we would love to see their cover letter and resume and get folks hired as soon as possible. Also, we are still in need of things like blankets and sheets, and as weather has started to get colder, we also are in dire need of warm weather gear in general for our programs. Things like hats, coats, gloves, and socks are extremely helpful right now and will help us to get through some of these cold snaps that we have coming up soon. So really appreciate anything that folks might want to offer there. I think that's all I have in terms of some logistics, but I know we may have some questions at the end that I'm happy to answer. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Ginny, who will be talking through a little bit more around our communications plan for this.
And before we go to Ginny, and I want to acknowledge I see some hands up among my colleagues, and we'll get to those questions. Amy, could you just, for the benefit of folks following along, confirm Winter Shelter operates from November 1st to...
Yes, thank you. I, for some reason, keep forgetting to share that information. That's one of the most important things, but it's just burned into my brain. So November 1st through March 31st is the time frame for Winter Shelter. And we really define that by the coldest times in our state. And so those months will really get us through some of the harder times. So that is our plan at this time.
And on that topic, I know you've done some preemptive planning around everybody's kind of looking at the weather forecast for this weekend. And I want to pair that with just making it clear to the public. Last year, as you mentioned, we operated the POV, you operated the POV, and then there was the Salvation Army facility. The Salvation Army facility is not part of the plan for this year. It's the POV and then the facility, the new facility. But I believe you've made some plans around this weekend given the weather forecasts, and I'm wondering if you could speak to those.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. So the Salvation Army we had utilized last year, unfortunately, they would really only be able to sleep about 30 people. So just not really enough space and didn't make sense to utilize. So yes, this year will be the POV and the Johnson Street location. As for this weekend, we are extremely concerned about the upcoming weather. For those of you who have looked, overnight lows on Saturday and Sunday night are -5 at this point. We're extremely worried about that, and very quickly we're discussing among our staff at the POV really the need to come up with a very quick plan to address providing some additional space if possible. And so we're lucky our partners at the Salvation Army did agree to allow us to use their space on Saturday and Sunday nights, just as for an emergency temporary shelter over the weekend. So we'll be providing shelter space there from essentially 8 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. those 2 nights, just to get us through this cold snap. Again, the capacity will be very low, but at least we'll be able to get a few more people off the streets and hopefully make sure they can make it through the weekend.
Great, thanks. Colleagues of mine, I know you get your hands up. I want to go to Jenny, have her cover her stuff, and then we'll come back to those questions. Jenny, all yours.
Thank you, Brian. I will be brief so that we have plenty of time for questions. We at the communications office knew that we would need a pretty robust communications plan because this is a big change for the community. Everything is a big change with COVID, and this is just another one of those things. So we put together a team of communications people from the city, the county, and some staff from the Poverello Center and our Office of Housing and Community Development. We also contracted with Big Sky Public Relations to help us do some of this pretty intense outreach that is still in progress. So I'll tell you just some of the highlights of what we've done, and then if you want to ask questions, that's good. Ongoing right now are meetings with external stakeholders. Those are Katie Cleats from Big Sky is doing some of those. Some of them she's doing in conjunction with Poverello staff, some of them in conjunction with me. We're doing some of them together. That's a list of about a dozen different meetings. They are very large organizations, though. For instance, this morning, Katie and I met with the general manager of Southgate Mall, and he will be communicating with all his retailers in the mall. So we're trying to cover the most amount of people in each meeting. We've also met with internal stakeholders. Those meetings are going on. We did a press release yesterday, and we also sent out a communication to the 4 neighborhood councils who are in the neighborhood of the Johnson Street Community Center. I was actually quite pleased to see that communication was widely and very quickly read by a number of people. So that speaks well to our neighborhoods program, because we immediately started getting questions and comments. We're presenting today, of course, to you. Tomorrow, a mailer goes out to 6,281 residents and businesses within a 4-mile radius of the Johnson Street shelter. One of the things that will do is invite people to attend the open house that we will hold Thursday, a week from tomorrow, October 29th, from 4 to 7 p.m. We have submitted a plan to the health department to do that open house safely. Have not heard back from them. They will probably tinker with our plan, but we're working with them proactively to make it safe. The building is, and I can say this as someone who personally measured it on Friday afternoon, the building is very large and very airy, all 3 rooms. So we think that interested people from the neighborhood can come safely masked. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions of city staff, county staff, police department, and electeds at that open house. We have an Engage Missoula page that is live now where people can go to find information, background. They can make comments and ask questions. There's also contact information if people want to ask questions individually or give a call to Jesse at the Poverello Center, the development director. We will eventually, when the space is ready, also shoot a video and some photos to link to that Engage page so that if people don't feel that they want to come to the open house, they'll be able to see what it looks like. As Amy said, the shelter opens on Sunday. We have, starting today, basically 4 engagement opportunities for the public. People can be tuning into this meeting here or they can watch it later. On Friday at 9 o'clock, Amy Allison Thompson and I will be talking about this on our City Talk radio show on KGVO, 9 to 10, and people can call in with questions, comments. We'll have the open house on Thursday, the 29th, and the Engage Missoula page at engagemissoula.com is also live and open. And that's it. That's what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Jenny. And I a colleague, I just wanted to clarify. You mentioned opening Sunday, November 1st, for folks
Right.
with the provisions that Amy described for Salvation Army this weekend as overflow. Great. I'm going to ask my colleagues. We do have a contract we need to approve, but want to get your questions. I just ask that you be as brief and as succinct as possible. Amber.
Thank you, and thanks for coming up with this plan. I would also say I've been in that building because my daughter's played volleyball there for many years, and it is big and it's open. So you know, as far as having some space in there, this does seem ideal. I'm curious, Amy, what are the most current? I don't know when the most current kind of count was done. And I'm wondering if we, you know, one of the things with COVID, we're all worried about more people becoming homeless. And so what our current numbers look like, will this spot along with the POV and the distance needs for distancing, is that going to be enough space? Is that going to be enough space for everyone this winter? And is the Salvation Army a possibility if we need more overflow in there? I'm just kind of curious what the update of where we are is.
Yeah, good question. You know, we don't have an official point in time count, I believe, from this past January, unfortunately. I don't believe those have been released. The numbers that we've really been crunching is our best estimate. We've also spent some time with our homeless outreach team taking surveys down to folks who are living in encampments around our community and asking them if we had this available, would they be willing to come inside? And we did find overwhelmingly that people were interested in coming inside. And so that is how we have crunched some of these numbers. I also anticipate that the space is large enough that we could potentially sleep more than 150 if needed. The only limiting factor would be our ability to staff that. So that would be an additional financial cost if we were to need to sleep more people. But I think if we were to get to that point, certainly we would reevaluate our options at that time and would certainly reach out and communicate that to you all and let you know that we were facing that challenge. So at this time, I do believe it will be adequate, but it is something we'll have to keep evaluating throughout the season.
Thank you. Brian, may I have a quick follow-up?
Real quick.
I just need a clarification. Did you say that there's going to be 1 meal a day served at that site?
Our hope is for 1 hot meal, but we also will have the option for stack lunches. And again, we're working through those logistics with the health department. So there will be food available more frequently than that, but for sure 1 hot meal is our plan at this time.
Sandra.
Thanks. I have 3 questions. The first one is, I'll just say them all out and then let you guys answer them. Will this emergency shelter allow substance abuse? A lot of folks are concerned about the nearby schools and parks, the safety with those. Is there any plan in place to address those concerns? And also, is the money already budgeted for? I can't quite open up my document, so I was wondering where the money was coming from.
Amy, do you want to take, or Aaron?
I can address a few first and pass that along to Amy. So the money is already budgeted for. The city and the county are both contributing $50,000 to this effort, and that was in the budget that council approved. In addition to that, the remainder of costs are being covered through a federal grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that is specifically for the use of COVID precaution and mitigation for individuals who are living on the streets. And so these are funds that really can't be used on anything other than what we're using them for. So we're incredibly lucky to have those come our way from the federal, from HUD at the federal level. And then I'll let Jenny and Amy speak to this as well if they have thoughts. But in regards to the school, I think that Missoula County Public Schools currently has schools in closer proximity to our previous emergency winter shelter location at the Salvation Army, and of course to the Poverello Center's current site. And I think they have great communication in place, and Jenny outlined some of that to be able to communicate with schools and communicate with individuals living in the neighborhood to address and mitigate issues if they arise, not necessarily assuming that they will.
Amy, anything you want to add about, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So in terms of issues related to nearby parks and that kind of thing, we certainly would encourage folks to call our homeless outreach team. That is always an option for folks. The homeless outreach team works to engage with folks who are living outdoors and is a phone number that folks are welcome to reach out to. We also, because of COVID response and because of the significant increase in people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, have been able to increase our homeless outreach team by 3 more additional FTE for a short time. And so we do have some additional capacity there that could help with any issues that may arise in the neighborhood, as Aaron was mentioning. In addition, we are planning on having both of our locations be low barrier again this year. Low barrier meaning that folks are welcome to be on site as long as their behavior is okay and not based on sobriety. And that was successful last year. We will continue to plan on doing that this year to make sure that as many people as possible are able to come inside and avoid the elements.
Julie.
Super apologize for the mute button faux pas earlier. I have not done that up until now.
No worries.
So a couple of questions. In the past couple of years that we've used the Salvation Army, the numbers have actually been fairly low of the usage there. Are we expecting more people to be using this shelter once it's opened? It's obviously a lot larger.
Yeah, I anticipate that because the POV is down to 88 people versus 175, there is a significant need. And we know that we are turning people away every single day at the Poverello Center and have been since April when we reduced our capacity to 88 people. So we know very clearly and through surveys with the homeless outreach team that there is a significant need. And I think any of you can notice as you drive through our community that there are many more tents outside and many more people who are in need of shelter. And that is due to COVID, the economic impacts of that, but also because of our reduction in shelter beds. So we do anticipate that this space will be utilized, yes.
Thanks. And can I real quick follow up?
Sure.
Asking for a constituent, there was mention of packaging and redistribution of clothing and donated items. And the question is, will this include retail distribution? Or
Julie, I can speak to that. I think that's actually a separate and different issue that will be in front of you in ANF in regards to a contract for another property on that MRL site.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Stacy.
Thanks so much. Ginny, I would just suggest that in the letter that goes out to the neighborhood, because I have started hearing from constituents, that we put the number for the hot team. I'm sure you're like 5 steps ahead of this, but just hot team number in there, as well as the way for folks to join that monthly Zoom community meeting. I think that that is a great way to, bring in the community address any concerns, build those relationships. And so that would just be my suggestion. My quick question is in regards to, I know with winter shelter last year, there was some transportation coordination between the POV and getting folks to the Salvation Army, and wanted to know what we were doing about, I realize it's a different location, and actually I think it's on a fairly regularly used main bus route, but wanted to see what we were doing about getting folks who may traditionally go to the POV because they know that, and to get them to the Johnson Street location.
So in terms of that, we are not planning for transportation this year. The reason for that is because it is on a bus line, but also because we anticipate that there will really be essentially kind of two separate groups using the different spaces. Our hope is not a lot of crossover between both shelters because of COVID. We'd really prefer that people are essentially using one shelter or the other. And I don't see really a need for people to be going back and forth a whole bunch. And so we are not at this point planning any transportation back and forth because both sites are going to be open 24 hours a day, essentially.
May I have a follow-up to that?
Yep.
Super quick. So that's great. And so I know at the POV during the day, there's a lot of wraparound services. The word is escaping me. Are those same services going to be available at the caseworkers? That's right. At the Johnson Street Center. So it helps reduce the need to go back and forth. Is it going to basically be like a fully operational second Poverello Center in terms of the wraparound services available?
The services will essentially be the same at both locations. So yes, our staff at both sites are going to be trained to do the same kind of coordinated entry activities around getting people into the coordinated entry system and that kind of thing. So all of that will be the same from site to site.
That's great to hear. Thanks.
Heidi.
Kind of unmute. So I guess transportation was one of my questions. Which bus line is it by, and is there any maybe thought of extending? I know some lines have really, they quit at 6 or, are very intermittent. And then I have a second question about, I guess, access points for service that are maybe not people that you would particularly house, but anecdotally, I'm seeing a lot of questions and around unhoused families that have lost housing recently, and what are the best entry points to direct them to in the community?
Good question. So if I'm okay to answer, Brian.
Yeah.
The bus line is bus 2 that it is on. I have also communicated already with Mountain Line to let them know about the location, so they have a heads up on that and are aware that they may see more traffic heading over in that direction. So they are aware of that. There has not been discussion around any extension of routes or anything like that. So I'm not sure where that might stand. And then your other question is suddenly escaping me. What was the last part of your question?
Just entry points to refer, especially unhoused families to, can we send them to you guys partnership? What are the best places to send people to?
Yeah, I would always direct people first to 211. I think the phone number 211 is a really great option, especially during COVID, for people to get additional information about resources in our community. And then the YWCA is going to be really managing any family shelter, kind of emergency shelter opportunities. And then of course the Family Promise program also has some opportunities, though I don't know about their waiting list at this time or if they're maintaining one.
Julie.
Sorry, I had one other thing. And Heidi, that number 2 is a Bolt line. So, and they just put in a brand new bus shelter right there. So my other comment was the Wednesday at noon neighborhood meeting kind of precludes any of us council members from participating. I don't know if
that's good to know.
Possible perhaps to think about another day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that we honestly just threw on the calendar as something that worked well for us, but honestly we can reconsider that to make sure that there's opportunity for attendance.
And maybe Julie, for that first one, we'll try to take that into account when we plan committees that day, which I realize is not ideal, but maybe we can bridge that somehow. So So,
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. We can definitely change that.
Gwen,
Brian, do you need a motion?
I do need a motion for the contract. So yeah, just by way of bringing us back, the specific action item we have before us is the contract that represents, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, both the 50,000 contribution from the city and the county, I think totals the $100,000 as referenced in there. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that is accurate. And council will see another contract come back before them in the coming month for the remaining CDBG funds. We're waiting for approval of our action plan with HUD. And so you'll have this item before you again in about a month, which will give us a nice opportunity to come back and provide an update on how things are going.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important that people understand, it takes quite a bit of money to do this. The additional funding from HUD is north of 300,000, if I'm not mistaken. And then we've got the city and the county, and I believe there's a little bit of in-kind contributions as well. But the short answer, Gwen, is yes. Would you like to make the recommended motion?
Yes, I would like to make the recommended motion.
Thanks. Did you want to speak to it at all? I didn't want to cut you off if need be.
No, given the time constraints, I'm just happy for all the information that's been shared today. I think that's the important thing, and I'm making the motion.
Thanks. So we have a motion on the floor. We are technically out of time. Gwen has graciously offered some time from ANF, but I want to take any public comment. And again, that's on the motion to enter into the contract, to approve the contract, which represents the city and the county's contribution in the contract with the Poverello for the services. If there's any public comment, folks can raise their hand in the attendees list. And I'm just pausing for a moment. Not seeing anyone. I want to quickly say thank you to Amy, to Aaron, to Teresa, to everybody who's been involved in the planning. I'd have to go back and check my calendar, but I've been in these meetings for, I believe, about 3 years, going back to when we were looking at when we used the transit center near the courthouse, to last year with the coordination with good folks at the Salvation Army, at the POV. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we started discussing in March or April what we were going to do about this winter now that we're talking about, given the Poverello's situation with the reduced capacity because of the COVID. And I think it's worth also expressing thanks and appreciation to Amy and her staff for how well you guys have managed thus far through the pandemic and such. It's been challenging, and you've had some. I know there was the time with the positives, but you've really done a phenomenal job managing through that. But when we all were gathering and looking at the space that we would need for this summer, for this winter. Like I said, those conversations kicked off, if I'm not mistaken, before we were even closed up for last winter. So I apologize for anyone I missed in thanking. This is a challenging issue to address, and I'm grateful to those in the community who have reached out and expressed thanks and support and appreciation for moving forward with this. I noted when we came across this site as a viable alternative that this center, sits pretty closely to sort of the intersection of the other four wards of the city. Ward 1 and 2, obviously. The POV is up in that area. So, this really is the entire community, all the wards, in essence, pitching in to help our fellow community members make it through the winter. So I will get off my soapbox. I want to thank anyone. I'm not seeing any additional raised hands, so we will have a roll call vote on the motion.
Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Santos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Masika,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
So 11 yeses and 1 absent.
Great. So that passes unanimously, and we'll go on the consent agenda for Monday evening. Thank you, everybody, and thanks, Gwen, for the additional